But Nathan, if anyone asks me direct questions, I'm going to answer them honestly. What does that mean? She turned to look at him directly. It means I have my own reasons for being at this party, and I won't lie if confronted. You brought me into this, but you don't control what happens next. Before Nathan could respond, they arrived at the venue. The Grand View estate was lit up like a palace with valet and attendants managing the steady stream of expensive cars. Nathan helped Grace out and immediately felt eyes turning toward them. They walked through the entrance together, and Nathan couldn't help but notice how Grace seemed to take in everything with quick, assessing glances. She wasn't gawking or overwhelmed. She was gathering information. Rebecca spotted them almost immediately. She looked beautiful in a silver gown, her blonde hair swept up elegantly. But when her eyes landed on Grace, her welcoming smile faltered. "Nathan," Rebecca said, approaching them with Julian at her side. "I'm so glad you came. Wouldn't miss it," Nathan replied smoothly. "Rebecca, Julian, I'd like you to meet Grace Hamilton." Grace extended her hand with perfect poise. "Congratulations on your engagement. It's lovely to meet you both." Julian shook her hand, and Nathan watched his rival's face carefully. For just a moment, he saw confusion, as if Julian was trying to place Grace's face. "Have we met before?" Julian asked. "I don't believe so," Grace replied, her voice pleasant but revealing nothing, "though I've certainly heard your name in business circles. You've had quite an impressive rise." Something in the way she said it, subtle edge that only Nathan seemed to catch. The evening progressed, and Nathan found himself increasingly amazed by Grace's performance. She moved through the crowd with effortless confidence, making conversation with business mogul and socialites alike. She knew when to speak and when to listen. She asked intelligent questions about market trends and investment strategies that had people engaged and interested. Thomas Torres, Rebecca's father, approached them at the bar. "Grace Hamilton," he said thoughtfully. "That name sounds familiar." "I have a common name," Grace replied with a slight smile, easy to confuse with someone else. "And how did you and Nathan meet?" Grace glanced at Nathan, and he saw a glint of mischief in her eyes. "He found me when I needed help the most. He saw something in me that others had overlooked. It's rare to find someone who looks beyond the surface." Thomas seemed satisfied with this answer, but Nathan felt a chill. Every word she spoke had multiple meanings, layers he was only beginning to understand. Later, as they danced, Nathan pulled Grace closer. "You're not just playing a role, are you? You know these people." "I know their type," Grace said carefully. "That's not an answer. It's the only answer I'm giving tonight." Across the room, Nathan saw Rebecca watching them, her expression troubled. Julian stood beside her, his jaw tight. Whatever Grace was doing, it was working. They were both unsettled. As the evening wore on, Grace excused herself to the powder room. Nathan was immediately approached by Oliver, who had arrived late. "Who is she really?" Oliver asked quietly. "'Cause I just overheard Thomas Torres on the phone, and he thinks he knows her from somewhere. He's making calls." Nathan felt his stomach drop. "What kind of calls?" "The kind where you ask private investigators to dig into someone's background." Before Nathan could respond, he saw Julian intercept Grace as she returned from the powder room. They were too far away for Nathan to hear, but he could see the tension in their body language. Julian said something, and Grace's expression went cold. She replied, and Julian actually stepped back, his face pale. Nathan quickly made his way over to them. "Is everything all right?" "Fine," Grace said, her voice tight. "Mr. Webb and I were just discussing old times." Julian looked shaken. "I think there's been a misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding," Grace said quietly. "I know exactly who you are and what you've done. The question is, does your fiancé?" She walked away, leaving both men standing there. Julian turned to Nathan, anger replacing his shock. "Where did you find her?" "It's none of your business. You have no idea what you've brought into this, Nathan. That woman is dangerous." Nathan felt a surge of protectiveness he hadn't expected. "Dangerous to you, maybe? Which makes me even more interested in what she knows." The party ended shortly after the festive atmosphere soured by unspoken tensions. Nathan and Grace left together, the silence in the car heavy with unasked questions. Finally, Nathan spoke. "Your name isn't really Grace Hamilton, is it?" She looked out the window at the passing city lights. "It is now. It's the name I chose when I had to start over." "Start over from what?" She turned to face him, and in her eyes he saw pain, anger, and determination. "From being Grace Whitmore, daughter of Daniel Whitmore, the man whose company Julian Webb destroyed 3 years ago." The silence that followed Grace's revelation stretched between them like a chasm. Nathan's mind raced, pieces of a puzzle suddenly clicking into place with devastating clarity. Daniel Whitmore, He remembered the story now. Whitmore Technologies had been a rising star in the software security sector, innovative and promising, till it had collapsed overnight in a scandal involving corporate espionage and fraud. The owner had been blamed, his reputation destroyed. His company absorbed into Julian Webb's growing empire. "Your father, Nathan," said slowly, his voice barely above a whisper, "was innocent." Grace finished, her voice steady but filled with an emotion so raw it made Nathan's chest tighten. Julian approached him as a potential partner. They worked together for 6 months. My father trusted him, gave him access to our systems, our innovations, everything. And Julian used that access to create a trail of false evidence that made it look like my father was selling client data to foreign competitors. The car pulled up to Nathan's building, but neither of them moved to get out. Grace continued, her words coming faster now, as if a dam had finally broken. "The lawsuit destroyed us. We lost everything. Our house, our savings, my college fund. All of it went to legal fees and settlements. My mother couldn't handle the stress and the shame. She had a stroke 6 months after the verdict. She's in a care facility now, and she doesn't even recognize me most days." "And your father?" Nathan asked, though he dreaded the answer. Grace's jaw tightened. "He took his own life 2 years ago, left a note saying he couldn't live with people believing he was a criminal. He maintained his innocence until the very end, but no one would listen. Julian's lawyers were too good, his fabricated evidence too convincing." Nathan felt anger rising in his chest, not at Grace for deceiving him, but at the injustice of it all. "Why didn't you come forward before? Why live on the streets when you could have fought back? With what?" Grace's laugh was bitter. "I had no money, no proof, no credibility. I was the daughter of a disgraced businessman. Any accusations I made would have been seen as the desperate claims of someone looking for revenge. I needed to rebuild, to become someone new, to find a way back into this world where I could actually make a difference." "Then I found you and then you found me," she agreed. "Or maybe I found you. I'd been watching the business community looking for someone who might have their own reasons to go after Julian. When I learned about Rebecca leaving you for him, I knew you'd be invited to the engagement party. I positioned myself where you'd see me, where your impulse for revenge might lead you to make an offer." Nathan should have felt manipulated, used. Instead, he felt a strange sense of respect. "You've been planning this for 2 years. Every day I spent rebuilding myself, learning everything I could about Julian's business practices, documenting his pattern of destroying competitors. But I needed access, a way into his world. You gave me that. What did you say to him tonight at the party?" Grace's expression hardened. "I told him I knew what he did to my father. I told him I had spent the last 2 years gathering evidence, talking to other people he's destroyed, building a case. And I told him that his perfect new life with Rebecca was about to come crashing down. Was it a bluff? Partially. I have evidence, but not enough yet. Not enough to stand up in court against his lawyers. But he doesn't know that right now. He's terrified, wondering what I have, wondering when I'll strike." Nathan made a decision then, one that would change everything. What if you had help, real help, resources, legal support, access to information? Grace looked at him wearily. "Why would you do that? This isn't your fight. Maybe not originally, but it is now. Julian tried to destroy my company too. I fought him off, but barely. And now I learn he's built his entire empire on the ruins of good people's lives. Your father's story, it's not unique, is it?" "No," Grace said quietly. "I found at least 7 other companies he's done this to. 7 other families destroyed. Some of them are still fighting, but most have given up. Then we don't just expose him. We build a case so comprehensive, so ironclad that even his lawyers can't save him. We contact every person he's hurt. We document every illegal action and we take him down properly." Grace studied Nathan's face, searching for sincerity. "This will be expensive. It will take time. And Julian won't go down without a fight. He'll come after you, after your company, after everything you've built. Let him try. I'm not Daniel Whitmore. I'm not someone he can easily destroy. And unlike when you were alone, you now have an ally with resources and connections." For the first time since Nathan had met her, he saw Grace's careful facade crack. Tears welled in her eyes, though she blinked them back fiercely. "Why?" she asked, her voice breaking. "Why would you risk everything for someone you barely know?" Nathan thought about his answer carefully. "Because I've spent my whole life building a company, accumulating wealth and success, and for what? To impress people like Rebecca. To win some meaningless competition against people like Julian. Tonight, watching you confront the man who destroyed your family, seeing your courage and your determination, I realized something. Some fights are worth having, not because they benefit you, but because they're right. They talked through the night, sitting in Nathan's apartment as the city lights glowed beyond the windows. Grace opened up about her life before the fall, about growing up as the daughter of an innovative entrepreneur, about her dreams of following in her father's footsteps. She spoke about the months after the collapse, watching her family disintegrate, feeling helpless and angry and lost. "I remember the day I decided to fight back," she said, her voice soft. "I was standing in line at a homeless shelter, and I overheard two businessmen talking about Julian. They were praising his business acumen, calling him a genius, and I thought, no one knows the truth. No one knows what he really is. That's when I realized I had to be the one to expose him, no matter how long it took." Nathan called Oliver first thing the next morning, explaining the situation. To his credit, Oliver didn't hesitate. "If you're doing this, I'm in. Let me reach out to some contacts, see what we can dig up legally." Over the next few weeks, Nathan and Grace worked together building their case. Nathan provided the financial resources and legal connections, while Grace contributed her knowledge and her contacts among Julian's other victims. They worked late into the night, documenting patterns, gathering testimony. Following money trails, Rebecca called Nathan several times, her voice troubled. "Julian's been acting strange since the party. He keeps asking about Grace. Nathan, who is she really?" "Someone who deserves justice," Nathan replied, "and someone who's about to get it." Evidence they gathered was damning. Julian had used the same playbook repeatedly, befriending struggling entrepreneurs, gaining their trust, and then systematically stealing their innovations while framing them for corporate crimes. He had hidden behind shell corporations and offshore accounts, always staying just within the bounds of legal deniability. But the pattern was unmistakable. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. One of Julian's former employees, guilty about his role in the schemes, came forward with internal documents that proved Julian had deliberately fabricated evidence against Daniel Whitmore. The documents were explosive, showing calculated planning and malicious intent. Grace cried when they received the documents. Real tears this time, not of sadness, but of vindication. "My father was innocent. We can prove it now. Finally, we can prove it." They took their evidence to the authorities and to the media simultaneously. The story exploded across business news channels. Julian Webb, the celebrated entrepreneur, was exposed as a fraud and a criminal. Companies he had destroyed were exonerated. Families began seeking restitution. Rebecca called Nathan one last time. "I didn't know," she said, her voice small. "I swear I didn't know what he was. But you would have stayed with him if he hadn't been caught." Nathan replied, not unkindly. "You chose him for his success, his status, his power. You never asked where it came from." The legal proceedings took months, but Julian's empire crumbled quickly. Partners abandoned him, investors pulled out, and former victims filed lawsuits. He was arrested on charges of fraud, corporate espionage, and conspiracy. The man who had destroyed so many lives would finally face justice. Through it all, Nathan and Grace grew closer. What had started as a transaction, a mutual using of each other for revenge, had transformed into something deeper. They had become partners, friends, and eventually something more. One evening, 6 months after the engagement party, they stood together in the office of what had been Whitmore Technologies. Nathan had purchased the building and was helping Grace rebuild her father's company, restoring its name and its legacy. "He would be proud of you," Nathan said, watching Grace review architectural plans for the renovated space. "I hope so. I spent so long being angry, being focused on revenge, that I forgot what he actually stood for. Innovation, integrity, building something meaningful. You haven't forgotten. You're living it now." Grace smiled, the genuine warm smile that Nathan had worked so hard to earn. "We're living it. I couldn't have done this without you. You would have found a way. You're the most determined person I've ever met. Determined. Stubborn. Maybe a little reckless," she listed, laughing. "All the qualities I admire most." They stood together, looking out at the city where they had both lost so much and found even more. The path to justice had been long and difficult, but it had led them to something neither had expected. Hope, healing, and a partnership built on trust and shared purpose. Rebecca's engagement party had been meant to hurt Nathan, to show him what he had lost. Instead, it had given him something far more valuable. It had led him to Grace, to a cause worth fighting for, and to the understanding that true success wasn't measured in wealth or status, but in the courage to stand up for what was right, even when the cost was high. As for Grace, she had reclaimed more than her father's reputation. She had reclaimed her own life, her own identity, and her own future. She was no longer just the daughter of a destroyed man. She was Grace Whitmore, entrepreneur, advocate, and survivor.